By putting my poem into this particular bacterium, I'm effectively writing a book that could outlast terrestrial civilization.
I'm Roger Bull. I manage the National Biodiversity Cryobank of Canada at the Canadian Museum of Nature. Here at the Cryobank, we deep freeze tissues and DNA samples from plants, animals, and other organisms to preserve their genomes, allowing them to be studied well into the future. Now, through a partnership with Library and Archives Canada, we have added something unique to the Cryobank. It's a work of poetry that is written into the DNA of a hardy bacterium. This creative work, called the Xenotext, consists of 2 sonnets. The first is encoded into the DNA of the bacterium. When that DNA sequence is translated, a functional protein is produced. The second sonnet is encoded in the amino acid sequence of that protein. Now let's hear from Christian Book, the award-winning Canadian poet who created this surprising fusion of science and literature.
I felt motivated to work on the Xenotext after reading a couple of articles in the early 2000s about futuristic visions of archival research, trying to encipher information into the genomes of organisms so that they might be preserved for prolonged periods of time. And as a consequence, I embarked upon a long-term project to encipher a poem into the genome of a bacterium so that it could conceivably communicate our presence on the planet to some distant civilization somewhere in the galaxy. My ideal host for this poem is an organism called Deinococcus radiodurans, an extremophile capable of surviving in all kinds of inhospitable environments. Its name means quite literally the dire seed immune to radiation. It can repair its own DNA when its DNA gets damaged. Encoding a poem into a bacterium is truly difficult. It involves assigning a letter of the alphabet to an individual genetic nucleotide. The genetic code consists of 64 3-letter words, an amazing code because everything that you see living around you is the product of a small vocabulary of 64 words. I'm trying to establish a dialogue between the basic building blocks of life and the poetry of the English language. The Xenotext consists of 2 very short sonnets. The first is written in the voice of Orpheus, and the second is written in the voice of Eurydice. The first poem is the one that I've written, and the second poem is the one that the organism writes in response. This is the Xenotext. Orpheus. Any style of life is prim. Oh, stay, my lyre. With wily ploys, moan the riff of any tune aloud. Moan now my fate. In fate we rely. My myth now is the word of life. Eurydice. The fairy is rosy of glow. In fate we rely. Moan more grief with any loss. Any loss is the achy trick. With him we stay. Oh, stay, my lyre. We wean him of any milk. Any milk is rosy. So the poem actually performs what it does. It says what it is going to do. And then you can look at the organism and see that it is in fact writing this poem because it is glowing red in the dark. The Xenotext constitutes a kind of futuristic archive, a bizarre little library capable of demonstrating that in the future we might be able to store information in libraries that are resistant to all kinds of planetary disaster. By putting my poem into this particular bacterium, I'm effectively writing a book that could outlast terrestrial civilization